All right, we're way down. Good, come way down in South Texas, south of Houston, where I think it gets what, 190 degrees.
Man, it feels like it this year. Whoa.
Wind blows and the rain comes down here, folks. I mean, like crazy. The wind being like 90 miles an hour, and there ain't even no hurricane out there.
That's right.
Then it comes in floods down here. Well, one time it actually flooded so much it washed Houston clean away.
It almost did. One rain we had for 57 inches 2 days.
It definitely come a rain down here. But anyway, we're down here at the Mr. George Tuinoff, and he's the owner of
TAHADA Whitetails.
TAHADA Whitetails. We come down here because he's got this famous deer that everybody in the deer farming industry, at least in Texas and mostly over in the Midwest, named Gunslinger. Now, I don't know where he come up with that name, but it stuck, and he's a great deer. I won't never forget the first time I met Mr. George. Had ventured out to Texas. Oh, it had to have been 6, 7 years ago, and to the TDA convention. I was just just starting out good with the feeders, and I met a guy from the DBC named Tim, and Tim told me about this. I asked him about who owned this great deer named Gunslinger. He said, "Well, that's Mr. George's deer, and you need to talk to him." So I kind of watched Mr. George that day, and when he went to eat lunch, I snuck over there real slick and sat right down beside Mr. George. Started talking to Mr. George about, "Hey, you need to get these great feeders I got. The guru got this great feeder. You need to get it." Mr. George didn't take but about 1 second. He didn't even hesitate to tell me that weren't going to be happening because he had them people that he had feeding them deer, and he'd been doing it all his life, and he just weren't interested. Well, I knew right then. I said, "Nope, don't be messing with Mr. George no more." I just look at him when I see him at the shows after that and say, "One day you'll have my feeders in there." And then one day it happened, and I'll let Mr. George tell you how it all got started.
Yeah, well, what happened was, I needed something for the fawns because the fawns are notorious trying to keep them enough feed, but not too much feed and ruining feed. And when I called a friend of mine, he said, "Man, I use Sam's feeders." And I said, "All right," I said, "I'll get some of those." So he had an order of big feeders coming, so you put a few little feeders on the back. And you're right, I do make my people feed every day, or I feed every day. I want my deer to be calm. And so then I got to looking at the price of them, and I looked at what it takes to get a big feeder and have the fawn feeder on it. One big advantage we've learned with our fawns is getting feed to them as quickly as possible. Whenever they start eating.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but I've heard that they were able to eat hard feed within, say, 9 days.
That's what they say, and they will eat some, but it seems like they follow their mama better than anything, so they kind of imitate her. And what I really liked about the feed was that, okay, I got a fawn feeder on with the regular feeder, and at under my sheds I put another feeder for fawns. But the problem is nowadays put a shed in a pen costs about $2,000. Plus it's an ugly shed in there. One thing that we're real big on is all of our pens have at least 3 feeders and at least 2 water holes. We've learned our deer are a lot more healthier that way because the big thing is, one deer, and you've seen it a lot of times, if you'll get one mean deer, push the other deer off. He may lay there till someone that he don't like gets up, then he goes over and pushes him away from the feeder. Yeah. So the more feeder, more water, the better. So when I got looking at these bigger feeders of yours, you know what? And if you remember, we cut the capacity down on the last ones. I didn't need the big capacity because we only feed usually 2-3 bags in the summer at a time. Don't get me wrong, they'll hold 10 or 12. But, like you said, it's 112 degrees down here. And so we try to keep the feed fresh. We actually store our feed in air-conditioned containers to keep it fresh. With putting your feeder out there, we were able to put a whole nother feed station, another fawn feeder as well, and a doe feeder without putting the shed up. And the cool part was that if we had a day that for some reason, say we're AIing or we're testing or whatever the case is, we know that every pen that has your feeder in it, if we don't get in there, at 8 o'clock and feed, we don't get in there till 4 o'clock. It ain't like they're without feed.
Yeah, so has that extra. So you can store some feed in it.
Exactly. It's like before we AI our does, and we're November 20th every year. November 19th, the guys will be out making sure not the doe feeders because we're cutting them off, for AI. But everything else, we're adding extra feed, so we don't have to worry about it. We put in the self feeders. You know, a lot of people say, well, why don't you use them all the time? It'd be easier. And it's true. If you don't want to be in your pens all the time, these feeders would be great. But the reason I was so set against getting them to begin with is I want people in there to keep them calm. But these feeders have worked really good. We've had no feeding problems. What I mean by feeding is when the feed comes down, it goes right into the fawn feeder. And so it's worked really well. And, you know, we get a lot of rain here. And that's you know, that was a big concern with when I talked to you earlier. And what I really appreciate when you design those lids a little bit bigger for me. Not everybody needs them. I understand that. But we have an average of like 65 inches a year. You know, that's average.
Ooh, Lord,
and so, so when you came in there and you redesigned those lids a little further for me, it really kept the rain out. And I really appreciate that. You know, even though most people don't need that, you were able to adjust it to make it work for me. And that's the reason we went back and bought more. You know, I don't make decisions on my own. I call the ranch manager, hey, what are you seeing? What do you not like? And he said, well, you know, these work really good. We get a little wet feed. If we get a real hard blowing rain, and keep in mind we usually get, on average, this year's driest we've had in years, but we get 3 or 4 rains a month. And there's only probably 2 or 3 rains a year that we get one of those driving rains that we get a little damp feed, but it's not enough to worry with, and the deer usually eat it before we ever get out there.
Yeah, I remember you. We were for the sale back in February, and Mr. George come up there, and he ain't lying, folks. He called his foreman. He didn't just come up there and make it on his own. And he told me, he says, we had one of the bigger feeders there with the extended roof, and they're all designed with the same distance and angle put in a computer. Well, the computer don't know everything. And that's why I tell people, hey, if this feeder don't fit what you need, if it's got one hang up, you tell me to hang up, and we'll get ready to hang up, and we'll make it to where it works for you. And that's what we did. We don't have a problem with that. I called the guys at the shop, and I said, look here, I need this lid for the big buck to be the same overhang as the gargantuan. Bam, it happened, and we got the feeders down here too.
Yeah, and they work well.
Now, are you getting any feed loss as far as coming out of the feeder?
A lot less than any other automatic feeder I've ever seen. We use another feeder for the bucks because we haven't seen any antler damage. And again, trying to build a 4th or 5th station, and it's had the lowest food loss out of an automatic feeder I've ever seen until yours. And it doesn't seem like, because the way the lips are, even the fawns don't kick the feed out.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of times, you know, deer, they end up with feed everywhere.
Oh, trust me. I got
but the way the lips designed, yours has very, very little loss. Those other feeders, you can put them up in a bed of grass, and you know how deer stomp grass down where they eat. Feeds that thick in no time. And so, you know, of course, that creates flies. It creates a lot of problems.
You don't like it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And so that was the whole reason I was so set against. I mean, the reason I started raising cows years ago was just so I could take the old feed out of the troughs and feed them. I was like, why am I throwing, you know, 80 or 100 pounds a day away? You know, because we feed close to a ton, a little over a ton a day. And we feed a lot of feed. We got 500 head of deer. And so that's the reason I got them. Well, with this feeder, we really haven't had hardly any loss at all.
I've had a couple of clients that, and it weren't the feeder's fault. Don't get me wrong, that they were getting the feed coming out. But I told them, I said, well, rotate the trough up a little bit, change the angle, and that solves the problem. I know because we've actually had to do that on the farm. I went out there, we'd had these 2 or 3 feeders in the same spot for years, and no feed was coming out. Then I went out there and there's feed on the ground. I'm like, holy shit, what is, you know, something got in it? Pulled the camera, no, nothing got in it. And I got to looking, and for the rain had washed the front legs out from feet out down, and it lowered the front of that feeder.
Right.
So change the angle of that thing, problem solved. We dropping no feed.
Yeah, I could see that easy on these. But, you know, we got a lot of grass, so even as much rain as we get, we don't get much washout.
So, I mean, people, and another thing I've had people say, well, why don't you put slides on for what?
You what?
Put slides on them so I can move them. I'm like, why? You know, there ain't no stink down in front of them. if the deer dig a hole down by eating out of them, just throw you some dirt in there. I mean,
Right.
it's a movie. Well, Mr. George, I am glad you took the time to speak with me today, and
Yeah,
I don't know what else
Glad you came all the way from Florida to bring us our stuff.
Hey, I'm here. I'd bring another load if you want them. Don't worry, Mr. George. Yeah, people say you deliver all your feeders. Well, yeah, I get to meet great people. I mean, how else am I going to meet people that are nice and great people if I don't take and deliver them the feeder and spend some time?
It's funny you say that. I drive most of my deer we deliver. I probably drive 70-80%. And anytime you buy a deer from us, everybody's like, you don't charge delivery fee. I said, nah. I said, if I'm driving it, I don't. I said, if I have to have a service or something, obviously I do. But I would like to get there and meet the people and see who I'm dealing with, so they can see who they're dealing with. When they call me up, and that's what I really appreciate about you is that, when you call us up, you're the one coming down here. It's not somebody we ain't met.
I ain't sending no flunky down here to screw it all up. Mr. George. I learned that early on, and we do charge a little delivery now, and it isn't for. Yeah, I would love to be able to still keep doing it with that.
Well, yeah.
If I don't, then I got to raise the prices of feeders even higher.
Yeah, it's all figured in on hard materials. You got to pay shipping on everything nowadays. But with live animals, I kind of use it as an excuse to get me. If I send the transport company, you got to pay for it. If you wait till it fits my schedule, it's free. They always seem to be able to not be in such a hurry.
I've heard that too. I tell people, the deal is here, you're going to get it on my schedule. So when I call and say I'm bringing your feeder, that means your schedule is that I'm bringing you the feeder.
Exactly. And you liable to call when you're supposed to be in Florida at a show.
Oh, that's true now. So I have to give Mr. George credit. I had some trailer loaded. I'm telling you folks, it was loaded with feeders to come to Texas. I was all jacked up, ready to go. I called Mr. George. I said, Mr. George, I'm going to be out there on Friday. Well, I ain't going to be here. I'm like, what you mean you ain't going to be there? I'm bringing you feeders. I'm going to be in Florida. You ain't going to be in Florida? I'm thinking, well, that ain't till next weekend. But Mr. George was right, and I was wrong, folks. I had to give him credit where credit's due.
That worked out pretty good.
Yeah, so we went to Florida, and then the next week I brought Mr. George feeders all up there.
I was still out there in Florida when
he was still laying on the beach, folks.
Well,
don't let him kid you.
yeah. Well, sometimes you got to relax.
You got to relax. Ain't nothing wrong with that, Mr. George. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
I do appreciate your time.